Hi everyone, it's Sabrina. Welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we are going to wrap up Project Life June, which is very exciting. It wound up a little bit bigger than May, but I had a few other stories that I wanted to add into my album. This first two is just a simple story about each of my kids, and it's actually kind of fun because I realized that I have these individual stories in the middle of June, and then I'm actually ending the month with a story about each of the kids. So both the kids in the middle of the month had, a little exciting thing go on. My daughter had a Girl Scout parade and she decided to participate in it, and it was very amazing. Like, she didn't even want me to come. She even asked that Dad get her a basket, and I was just so proud of her. And I loved this card that said, "I love you and I love your story." And it was actually a card for Father's Day because it said "Thank you, Dad," or something like that. So earlier you saw me put a sticker on it that says growth. And then I grabbed a few hearts from my stash and just added that to the side. And that's really it. I thought about adding a big stamp title. I may be pulling in some of that green, but I might go into more depth with this story in my daughter's album at some point. But for now, I just wanted to kind of do an overview. And in the story, I just talked about how my daughter didn't even hesitate. She absolutely wanted to do this parade, and I got to watch her on the sidelines, walking down Main Street, tossing out candy and saying hi to people, and it was so cool, and I was just so proud of her. And this definitely needed a little spot in our family album. Now, the story about my son, it may seem silly, but if you have teenagers, you can totally relate. Sometimes it's tricky to get your teenagers to do things, and that's how it was for my son. And I was sorting Legos last summer. That was my big goal last summer, to sort the Legos, and spoiler alert, it did not work. It just didn't work. But I was doing this project last summer, and I asked my son to come build Legos. And so not only did I get him out of his room, but I got him to build Legos. And he always builds the coolest things. So I have a photo of him. He's kind of blurry because I did the focus on his build. And then I'm just going to pair in some cards that I'm making. So this vellum one has a die cut that says "Let's do summer," and then 2 word phrase stickers, "Small moments" and "Don't miss the fun." And I kind of staggered those, and you saw that I tilted the die cut and just cut off the part that I didn't need. I also pulled a green chipboard from my stash that says "Around Here," and then another one that's blue that says "The Story," which is from the Stories by the Month kit. But I have 2 white journaling cards you can see here, and I'm going to have to make them, which is fun and no problem, but I want to figure out a unique way to make them. So I went looking in my stash, and I found the Allie Edwards frames, what's it called? The story stamp that she's doing, the subscription, and I haven't used it a ton, so I'm going to use that. And what I decided to do was take one of the frames and then stamp it right in the middle. Push down really, really hard because I wanted to make sure I got, a good impression on the first time. Then what I'm going to do is use some of those words to stamp inside the frame, but not the entire frame, if that makes sense. I just did a little hint of the words down at the bottom. And then I'll do a different sized frame at the bottom of the other card because I know this card I'm going to do some journaling about what my son was building. And then I'll also add some words because not only does this stamp set have a ton of the frames, or I guess you could call them almost postage stamps, it has a bunch of words. You can see it in the top right of my screen, but it's a fantastic stamp set, and I just love it. And I've barely put a dent in using it. But I took the phrase "aw yeah," and I'm going to stamp that in blue ink, and it looks so good. It's going to look awesome, and it just adds a little extra oomph to my page and also brings in that blue because I was focusing on green and blue, and I realized in the photos my son's building has red and green, but I went with blue and blue and green. So same thing like with my daughter's project. She had on her green Girl Scout vest, and I decided to just totally pretend green doesn't exist and go with more of a monochromatic. And you can see now how I did the stamping for the around here. I did Loving This, and I just kind of staggered the way that I stamped it. So it just looks, I love it. It looks so good. And it's just like a little, I don't know, it's something different. And I also had a vellum piece that said Everyday Moments, and I was kind of floating that around, wondering if I should include it, and then I decided I'm not going to. I wanted to start off the journaling card by stamping the story, so I stamped that 3 times, and then I'll add in my journaling lines, and I'll just say that I was thrilled to have my son build Legos, and it just, still to this day, he's going to think I'm ridiculous, but it fills me with such joy to see what he builds, because his brain is just so creative when it comes to different Lego things. And he came up with this little building, and I guess it's called a micro build, which means it's super small. And he also made me a farmer's market, and I didn't include that photo. Again, if I go into more depth at some point for my son's album, I would include that photo as well. But it was really awesome that he made this, and I even took that, the building that he made, and I just set it right on one of our coffee tables, and I'm like, that is going to be a decoration piece. It can just sit right there. So that is the story of that little page, and now I can put both of these into the album. And the next page that I will work on is, I believe, the beach. I wanted to document a beach trip that we took, and of course I'll have to glue the pages back to back at some point. The Girl Scout one to the page before, or the page after, which I think is the fun spread, because I do always try my best to use scrap paper. Like this beach paper, I printed out the collage that I had made, and then I backed it to a piece of scrap paper, and then, you can see it right there. It has a bunch of lines. So it's important to me to try to use up the scraps. But then I save all the scraps. Like my scrap bin is literally overflowing, and I can't even slide it into my slot that I have. So it's on my list to organize this summer, but it's so hard to let go of paper. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I keep every single scrap. On this beach page, I went to a really old travel kit with, of course, a beach theme, and just die cut a bunch of things. Water fixes everything, some surfboards, but I'm going to pretend they're like boogie boards because that's what my daughter had in her hand. Or is there a difference between the two? I don't know. But I am calling them boogie boards because that's what my daughter calls hers. And I just went with the pinks and the blues and kind of a soft neutral. And as I'm putting together these cards, or like the 2 sections that I have that are kind of decorative, I'm realizing I don't need 2 journaling spots. I really don't. So I am going to fix that in a little bit. I also forgot when I printed the collage to leave a stroke, like a line around the remember box. So I'm going to have to figure out what I want to do with that. I thought I might just use like a regular pen, but I'm actually going to use my Tombow and kind of outline it, and that should work really well. I also took a large blue die cut that says sun rays for days, and then a long strip that says be the sunshine. So I love how that worked. It added to the overall movement of the page with the different clusters. And then there was a small gap in between the photo of my daughter and then the photo of my daughter and myself. So I just put kind of a small title there that says beach, and it worked out. You can't even tell that there was a little gap. And then this is where I am going to add in that line for the Tombow. I was just kind of thinking like pin or Tombow, and I'm so glad I went with the Tombow because it's kind of a neutral color. I just should have moved the surfboard first because I don't know, it did something funky with my pen, and I apologize for you seeing my head a bunch of times, but I really am glad that I outlined that box because I am not someone that can do straight lines, just writing, and yeah, I needed visually to see the box. And then once I had that box drawn in, I just made sure the surfboard was trimmed off at the bottom. And then this is where I'm going to start to kind of work on adding to my title card. Because technically this was my title card, I kind of knew that I wasn't going to have two places to do journaling. Going to the beach is pretty self-explanatory. I don't need a ton of journaling unless something, like a special story happened at the beach. But in this case, it was just a regular day at the beach, so not a lot of space is needed. I found a really fun sun-looking shape in my stash. I don't know what stamp set it's from. I want to say it's from the Let Go story kit, but I love how it matched well with the sun. So I just used a soft pink color to add it throughout the project. I had a little bit of trouble stamping it in a few sections, but that's okay. Like, I wanted it in between the water die cut and the two surfboards, but it didn't show up very well, so that's okay. In the 6x8 stamp sheet that I made for June, I had a really large June title, so I'm going to use that. Then I also pulled out Summer Joys, and I set that next to the June. And then above that, I wanted something that I could stamp like repeated. So I went with the word loving, and I liked how that was set up, so I removed the stamps and got to work stamping. When I am going to make a stamped journaling card, I do tend to lay out the stamps first to make sure I like how it looks on the card, and then I go ahead and stamp it. If you've watched my videos for a while, you know that I am definitely a planner, so I'm not someone that can just like take a pile of supplies and just go. I have to kind of like set things out and see how they look. So I had Here Comes Summer to stamp on the Remember card, but that really didn't fit. So I went with Simply Savoring, something a little bit smaller, and I'm glad that I did that. I also wanted to make sure that my Summer Joys, the blue, wasn't too bright. It is a little brighter than I wanted, but I didn't have any other ink that worked, so it's just going to have to work. And then the Loving is my neutral, and I stamped that 2 times, and it looks fantastic. And I'm a big fan of little clusters of stamps, so I took I think it was the inside of a flower, and I stamped that in multiple different spots for kind of a pop of neutral. And I think it looks okay. I may have stamped it a few too many times, but that's all right. And I'm also going to add some puffy stickers, just a few of them, because since that Summer Joys was so bright, I wanted to make sure that I added in a pop of that brightness in other spots as well. And I have so many of these little puffy stickers. I think I wound up with buying an extra set or something. I don't know. But I'm using them up, and that's what matters. And once I get done with that, I'm going to add the lines for the journaling and just, talk about the beach day. I was having trouble placing where I was going to put the puffy sticker, but I didn't want to extend that cluster on the Remember card any more than I had it. So I just pulled off the puffy sticker, used the adhesive remover, and you couldn't even tell that it was there. Added in my lines for journaling and just talked about how going to a local beach, because we live around an area that has lakes, is always a must-do in the summer. We bring all the snacks, the inner tube, a Frisbee, and our canopy, and it just makes for a wonderful afternoon. I will say that we are getting better and better as each year goes by. Not remembering. No, the word is remembering. We are getting better at remembering things, and so that's what matters. Eventually, we'll get to the point like 15 years down the road, which is where we're almost at, where we will remember everything. It's just each year we keep adding to our list of supplies. Oh, this would be good to bring, and this would be good to bring. But that is my beach page. It looks fantastic with the pretty neutrals and all the fun stamping. And so the last page for June is going to be a wrap-up page. Now, when I do wrap-up pages for my months, I really like to go with family photos or a collage of some type. But this particular month, there really wasn't a family photo, and I really didn't have a lot of photos to do collages, and I had one last story that I really wanted to document about the kids, because both kids ended the month with some really awesome sports achievements. So I printed out photos of both of them, and I had originally thought I would do a flip up and flip out for both of them, because I had an extra photo for my daughter and an extra one for my son. and I'm using the fan story kit, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to bring this together. There is a shot, really great shot of my son standing on the field, but the porta potties are back there. And I thought I could erase it in Photoshop, but there was players on the team that would have been erased, and I don't know. So I'm going to figure out a different way to kind of erase the porta potties or take away from the focus on the porta potties. At least for me, I could not stop focusing on it. Maybe it was just me, but I put the number 1 fan and stapled it, and I love how that looks. And then I just decided, you know what? I'm going to keep things simple. That is what I am aiming for. And so I'm not going to do any flip ups and flip outs. I'm just going to use these 2 photos. And again, like I said earlier, if I want to go into more depth, I can save these extra photos for my kids' personal albums. But the whole point is to move forward, and that's what I want to do. So I grabbed a few word phrase stickers and also that really colorful chipboard to add up at the top. And that's about it. And then I'm just going to do some journaling about what their 2 achievements were, and that'll be the end of June. The only thing that I thought I could add, and obviously I didn't add it here, but I could add something that says, end of June. I don't know. I felt like that was kind of the only thing that was missing. So my daughter ended the month by going up in the next rank in karate. So she went from red to red black belt, and her dedication is absolutely impressive. Like, she is just so amazing and so awesome to watch. And then my son played his first comp soccer tournament in the last weekend, and he played defender, and he just played hard and nearly every single game, and he just loves soccer. And I love watching both of them. I am definitely their number 1 fan, and I just, can't get enough of watching both of them do their thing. So I love it. Okay, so that page is done. What I'm going to do now is flip back to the beginning of June and kind of give you a quick little walkthrough of the month. And again, this month wound up bigger than May, which makes sense because it's the start of summer. So I have this vellum sheet and then a grid collage, the weekly kind of everyday spread, the little stories about my kids, different things going on in the middle of summer, followed by this really awesome, fun, spread. I love how that one turned out, especially with the scallop pictures, documenting an overview of our trip and lots of stamping for a huge flip up. And then the next page is week 25, followed by the beach. Then we have week 26, where I use that circle good times paper. And then we wrap it up with a fan page. So I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'd love a thumbs up or a subscribe if you are new to my channel. Have a wonderful day. Bye.